Hello everybody. Today's video is going to be a further association making between the Flavian court and the imperial family of Titus Flavius Vespasian. His father obviously, and the son Titus is really who we're looking at, and the early Christian church and the associations of and the links to that imperial family and the beginning of Christianity, really, and the first Christians, some of the first martyrs, the first saints. So I'm just going to read an essay for you, and it won't be too long, I hope. Okay, the association of St. Nereus and Achilles with Flavia Domitilla and the Flavian imperial family, a survey of the primary evidence. The connection between St. Nereus and Achilles and the Flavian imperial family, particularly through Flavia Domitilla, has long been preserved in Christian tradition. Although direct historical evidence is sparse and often legendary, a careful survey of the available primary sources, liturgical texts, and archaeological data reveals a consistent association between these early martyrs and the Christianized branch of the Flavian household. This essay presents a comprehensive overview of the evidence linking Nereus and Achilles, and Domitilla, and by extension to the family of emperors Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian. So Vespasian, father; Titus, son; Domitian, his brother. He wasn't particularly nice as far as we can tell. And who upended and upturned a lot of the things that Titus did. Only in his 2-year reign he died. Unfortunately, if you watch as well those who are about to die, it's about that family, and it's about Titus when he comes back from his missionary activity, his ministry. Here's not that; that's a joke. In joke, from his taking Judea back for the Roman Empire from these rebels. The catacomb of Domitilla. Sorry, I left the window open. Archaeological evidence. The catacomb of Domitilla on. Apologies, guys. The catacomb of Domitilla on the Via and Ardientia, south of Rome, is one of the oldest and most extensive Christian burial sites in the city. It dates to the late 1st or early 2nd century CE, so perfect time period, and contains numerous Christian symbols and inscriptions confirming its use by early believers. Importantly, the catacomb is traditionally associated with Flavia Domitilla, identified either as the wife or niece of Titus Flavius Clemens, a consul under Emperor Domitian. Early Christian tradition holds that the property on which the catacomb was constructed belonged to Domitilla or was set aside by her for Christian use. The burial of St. Nereus and Achilles in this catacomb strongly supports their link to her and indirectly to the Flavian dynasty. Domitian, I think it was 81 to in the 90s that he reigned as emperor. Martyrologium Hieronymianum. Sorry, these words are very foreign to me. This early Christian martyrology, attributed to Jerome and compiled in the 5th century, preserves even earlier liturgical traditions for the feast day of May the 12th. It states, Via Ardietina, in the cemetery of Domitilla, the natal day of St. Nereus and Achilles. This entry clearly situates their martyrdom and burial in the Domitilla catacomb, thereby tying their memory to the site and the imperial woman associated with it. The Acta Santorum Passio SS. 'Nieri et Achilli, 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 'Nieri et Ach This legendary hagiography, Passioss, dates from the 5th or 6th century, but purports to narrate the events of the 1st century. While not historically reliable, in all its details, it reflects a long-standing Christian tradition. Nereus and Achilles are described as eunuchs or attendants of Flavia Domitilla, possibly slaves or freedmen within her household. Under her influence, they converted to Christianity, were baptized by the Apostle Peter, according to this tradition, and subsequently refused military service. For their faith, they were beheaded and buried along the Via Ardeatina. Though apocryphal in nature, the Passia preserves the idea of a spiritual triad between Domitilla and these two saints, emphasizing their close domestic and religious bonds. So this is probably part mythologized, but it retains a memory. Liber Pontificalis, number 4, Liber Pontificalis, a late 5th century compilation of papal biographies, notes that Pope Siricius, 384 to 399 CE, constructed or restored a basilica over the catacombs where Nereus and Achilles were buried. He constructed a basilica above the tomb of the martyrs Nereus and Achilles in the cemetery of Domitilla. This basilica, dedicated specifically to them, confirms the continuation of their cult and its association with Domitilla's property, further reinforcing the traditional link. The pilgrim itineraries, 7th to 9th centuries. Several pilgrim itineraries to Rome list visits to the tombs of these two and the cemetery of Domitilla. These include the itinerarium Malbes Buriense and other anonymous guides. By this period, their shrine was a well-established pilgrimage destination, and their connection to Domitilla was considered part of accepted Christian memory. So Domitilla here is part of the family, just an extended part of the Titus family. Several Eusebius of Caesarea, Ecclesiastical History 3:18 to 20. Though Eusebius does not mention Nereus and Achilles, he is a key source for placing Flavia Domitilla within the Christian tradition. Flavia Domitilla, daughter of a sister of Flavius Clemens, one of the consuls of Rome. So Titus Flavius Clemens, one of the consuls of Rome. Flavia Domitilla, daughter of a sister of, she's a niece, right? Was exiled with many others to the island of Pontia for the testimony of Christ. This is early, guys. This passage confirms that a close relative of the Flavian, this is actually 1st century, can you believe that? But here's the deal, this is still in a time where you're not really talking about Christianity as the history would go. It's Judaism. We're going to talk about that very soon. I hope this doesn't run too late. Was exiled for Christian beliefs. The passage closely knitted her persecution under Domitilla supports the broader idea that Christianity penetrated the Flavian household. While not a direct link to Nereus and Achilles, it establishes the Christian commitment to a noble woman with whom they were later associated. Now, Jerome, de Virius Illustrabus, Jerome echoes Eusebius by stating Flavia Domitilla of the imperial family was exiled to the island of Pontia by Domitilla for confessing Christ. And now again, this is one of these fairly substantiated early traditions. Once again, we find a primary Christian source affirming Domitilla's Christian identity and Flavian lineage. Her exile aligns with traditional accounts of these two, Nereus and Achilles. Conclusion, synthesis of the evidence. While the precise historical roles of Nereus and Achilles remain difficult to verify, the convergence of archaeological, liturgical, hagiographical, This is the stories of early Christian people and important people. Hagiographies. The patristic sources affirms their close association with Flavia Domitilla. Through her, they are indirectly linked to the Flavian imperial family that included Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian. The most solid evidence is their burial in the catacomb of Domitilla. Okay. And I want to, so I'm just going to read something else for you. I'm going to leave that one there, but I have another thing I just wanted to bring up. So both Titus Flavius Clemens, Titus's cousin, and one of the first popes, Pope Clement now the first, and later Titus Flavius Clement of Alexandria. So the Titus Flavius Clement, and then this Clemens character, Clement of Alexandria, 3rd century, 200s. An early Christian father and very possibly another relative were seminal figures in the early church. The latter, Clement of Alexandria, was instrumental in getting the anchor fish icon raised to one of the most important symbols in the early church. Now, the anchor fish icon, you can find it online, is one of the earliest Christian symbols. Before you get the cross, you get the anchor and the fish, or the dolphin, or the two fish. And it's found we have about 65 to 69 or so archaeological finds of this with Christians, and it was minted by Titus. The book Creating Christ goes into this in some volume. Suetonius in Domitian, he did his Lives of the Caesars. So in Domitian chapter 14-15, it recounts how Epaphroditus and Clement were both punished by Domitian. Clemens executed Epaphroditus likewise for failing to prevent Nero's suicide, according to Suetonius. Domitian, Titus's brother, evidently hated and upended many of the things his brother laid down, as I said, during his reign. Epaphroditus and Clement appear eerily like the same men associated with the nascent traditions, both men being early martyrs executed, we can assume, by Domitian, with an Epaphroditus belonging to the Book of Life in Philippians 4:3. Moreover, so Paul there might be some, depending on how we look at Paul here, there might be something going on here as well. And Paul recounts names of people that turn up in the 2nd century. I'm just gonna go away. So that's quite interesting. Moreover, there is tentative evidence that Clement of Rome and Titus Flavius Clement may be the same person, or that Clement was at least modelled on Clemens. This is entirely speculative, but they were both centred in Rome in the 90s. Right around the same 1 or 2 years, parts of these histories are known to us. And at least historically, the immense silence on a New Testament Jesus by this time is deafening, which mirrors Clement's celestial Christology perfectly in 1 Clement. So Clement doesn't really talk about Jesus, the personage. He's talking about celestial Jesus up there. Clemens was accused of atheism, Cassius 67:14, often a correlate for rejecting Roman gods. So he called going with other gods against the Roman gods atheism in this time, and for adopting Jewish ways or sympathies with Judaism. Suetonius here, so Suetonius on Domitian 15, or sympathizing with Judaism. So this Clemens character is sympathizing with Judaism. Now, in the early times, Christianity, as many Christians would agree, was synonymous with Judaism. It hadn't yet fully kind of parted ways and distinguished itself. This could point to a crude form of Christianity in these times. The mode of execution for Clement I, via being tied to an anchor and thrown in the sea was a novel means, but symbolic of steadfast hope. Hebrews 6:19. So the anchor comes up in Hebrews again. It might be coincidence, but it's interesting all the same. And later associated with Christian iconography, so that it might be some kind of crude way to go from a bastard in Domitian, who is saying, well, you like the anchor and the fish, this is your symbol, well, we'll throw you overboard with an anchor tied to your legs. How about that? Just speculation. Finally, his wife, Flavia Domitilla, is identified as an early Christian. So we just went into this. And so, again, with Clemens Epaphroditus and Domitilla all suffering under Domitian for apparently the same slip into Jewish ways, and Clemens of Rome also associated with persecution, the connections tentatively exist here. However, this is a vague, I'm saying here, there is a relationship. So we got the time period, we have Rome, we have Clement and Clemens, a period in Christianity with Clement's first letter where there's no gospel knowledge. So kind of Judaic thinking. Now Titus also his concubine. He has a mistress who's 10 or so years older than him, called Berenike. And she appears in Acts, as does Herod Agrippa II. And he's portrayed reasonably well in Acts. So you get these people, historical people, turning up in Acts, under Luke Acts, the same Luke Acts that really showcases Titus's military, what's the word I'm looking for? Escapades in Judea and Galilee. It's all rather interesting. This I will put out in some play. I'm going to really try and focus on getting this out. Now, these things are talked about in Creating Christ by James Valiant, and in Caesar's Messiah by Joseph Atwill. And they're both very interesting books. I'm going to try very hard in the next few years really to get their information out here, because the evidence actually keeps on compounding, and this is a very little explored area of early Christianity, exactly how much the Roman footprint is on traditions that really formulate properly in the 2nd century, with no evidence whatsoever of there being in Jesus in the 1st. And this point, when you're talking about Titus's influences here, he has clearly become friends with Jews. He's dating a Jewish lady, Berenice, and all of these people are like in close association. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to leave that there. But yeah, this is based upon some very interesting evidence. All primary sources link back to this potentially being true. I have speculated in placing saying that Clement I of Rome and Titus Flavius Clemens are the same person. That is speculative, but there is some circumstantial evidence to back this up. Peace and love.